new commercial framework by which we can bring those partners on board and expand it even more.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Round. Senator Kaine, please.
Thank you to each of you for your service. And Admiral Richard, let me begin with you. You talked about how some of our defense concepts are a little bit outdated in your realm because they were based upon kind of a two-party dynamic, and now we have to grapple with a three-party dynamic. I think it's even more complicated than that because two of the three parties are now cooperating in ways that they hadn't. I've often asked questions in this committee and in the Foreign Relations Committee about growing cooperation between Russia and China, and usually folks on your side of the table tell me that I don't need to worry about it much because there's so much historical animosity between Russia and China that they're not likely to cooperate. I think we're finding that actually not to be the case. Whatever the past is, they're cooperating a lot more now. So I'd like you to each tell the committee in your own domain, how are you planning to take into account the increasing cooperation between Russia and China in either the STRATCOM or SpaceCom areas?
Senator, first, I would want to say I'm not going to tell you that I'm not concerned about that. I'm very concerned about what opportunistic aggression looks like. I'm worried about what cooperative aggression looks like. And so, one, this gets back to I have to deter all of them all of the time, which means every day we're thinking about their decision calculus and what we have to do to influence so that basically they say not today. And so right now you have to look at what's happening in one place and then walk over and see what that does to change decision calculus and change your messaging potentially, change your posture. And that's just in the opportunistic frame. And then do you have the plans ready to understand what cooperative looks like? So we do that every day, Senator.
Great. General Dickinson.
Senator, we look at it each and every day, just as Admiral Richard does. But in the space domain, we just have to look to see how much more capability development that they've done just on orbit. We can go back to November just to look at the Newdahl test, and then, as I mentioned in my opening statements, the SJ-21 in particular. So just individually, the growth of their capabilities on orbit is of concern. And then when you look at from the civil perspective, the Chinese and the Russians have entered into a lunar station agreement that they're going to build a station on the moon. So it's not just the military that we're looking at carefully, it's also kind of their civil piece as well by both of those nations.
General Dickinson, you've segued into my next question, the civil dimension. So there's been news recently that was sort of interesting news, kind of in a way positive news. Elon Musk has been getting some press for his role in providing ground stations and internet coverage to Ukraine with the Starlink satellite connection. So that's positive. Russia has been trying to jam the signals and block coverage. That's made me wonder, there are non-state actors in space, too, that can enter into contested environments. Describe the legal framework for commercial capability in space and to SpaceCom war game scenarios where private actors become involved in contested situations.
We do look at that, Senator, and really to begin with, I think what we're seeing with Elon Musk and the Starlink capabilities providing is really kind of showing us what a mega constellation or proliferated architecture can provide in terms of redundancy and capability. But to your point, though, we work very closely in our commercial integration cells with that very issue.
Admiral Richard, one last question for you. I met last week with General Von Ovest of Transcom, and we talked about future tanker requirements. It's my understanding that the airborne tankers that support the bomber leg of the triad have a varying degree of EMP, electromagnetic pulse hardening, to include the KC-46. So talk to us about STRATCOM's role in shaping requirements for future tanker programs to ensure that EMP hardening is part of the DNA.
Well, Senator, you hit on a key point as I'm one of the customers of the tanker fleet, and in that I have certain requirements, EMP protection, electromagnetic pulse being one of those. So one is to clearly articulate the requirements. Two is go see what we can do in terms of employment of our force to reduce that demand signal. A great example I'd point to, and I would give credit to the Air Force, is the re-engining of the B-52s. The engines on those date back to the 60s. They burn a lot of gas. Re-engine, less fuel required, less tanker demand. And then what other efficiencies can we achieve while still maintaining the flexibility and the signaling capability of the air leg, which is one of its prized attributes?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kaine. Since a quorum is present, I would now ask the committee to consider the following civilian nominations. The Honorable Robert P. Storch to be Inspector General of the Department of Defense, Dr. Lester Martinez Lopez to be Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs, Mr. Christopher J. Lohman to be